I had a question in my comments a couple months ago. You often talk about the difference between indie eyeshadows and how they sparkle in mainstream brands and how those sparkles are different. And what I thought we could do today is go through my makeup collection, swatch some things. I'll describe the texture of the eyeshadows from mainstream brands and from indie brands. And I thought that could be really exciting. But I don't have eyeshadows from every brand because I like to keep my makeup collection very curated. And speaking of brands that like to keep things curated, let me tell you about today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Merit. Merit makes a couple of my favorite products in my makeup collection. I'm really excited to tell you about some of my favorite products from Merit. All of Merit's products are vegan, cruelty-free, and non-comedogenic. I'm gonna start with the Merit Great Skin Primer. This is one of their newer products, and I have been really enjoying it. This product is really great because it adds just the softest of blurs to the skin and really preps it for makeup. My favorite thing about any makeup product is blur. Next up is a product that I have had in my makeup collection before, and I've used an entire stick of it up. It is the Minimalist Perfecting Complexion Stick. I have the shade Silk. What I really like about this is that it makes it easy to apply just the amount of coverage that you want. I also really like that this product has a nice skin finish. Next up, I'm going to be using the Day Glow Highlighting Balm in the shade Kava. I'm a fan of glowy, glossy cheeks, and I just like to apply this directly. It just gives my skin that very healthy glow. Next, I will be using the Flush Balm in the shade Fox. Take this directly to the skin and just tap it in with my finger. My favorite aspect of this is that it's really hard to overdo it. And as someone who can be pretty heavy-handed with my blush, I find this invaluable. Finally, I'm going to finish off with the Merit product that has been in my makeup collection the longest. It is the shade 1990 in the Signature Lip. This color is so pretty. I know a lot of people can be intimidated by brown lipstick. It's a lightweight, beautifully sheer product, so it's never going to look like it's doing too much, just like the blush. I finished off this look with some other beautiful products from Merit. If you are interested, check the link at the top of my description box to save $20 off exclusive sets from Merit, as well as check out all the products that I used on my face today. Every first order will receive the signature makeup bag, this beautiful little thing here. And if your order is over $40, it will ship for free. Thank you, Merit, so much for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to the eyeshadow. In my time pondering this question that the commenter had left, I saw that the Moondust eyeshadows from Urban Decay went on sale. So they're normally $24. I got them for $12 each. And I know a lot of people have interest in the Moondust eyeshadows, and I think a lot of people, even if they haven't purchased them, might have had the opportunity to swatch them to know what these are like. So these are kind of going to be like our baseline, and I'm also going to try to find colors in my other eyeshadow palettes and in my collection to kind of compare these two. The idea is not to find like dupes for these eyeshadows. It's really so that I have some colors that are pretty close together, and whenever we're swatching them and we're looking at them, everything is kind of similar. This will also kind of subtextually be like a little bit of a review for these eyeshadows. I've had them in my collection for a while and I've gotten to know them pretty well. And these are the kind of things that I'm into right now. So we'll talk about also those, but that's not the main idea of this video. Let's start with Space Cowboy. And one thing I will note about the Moondust eyeshadows is that they are very firmly pressed. And that is going to be very different from what you're going to find in indie makeup brands. But get into that color, you can see it's just a lot of sparkle. People really like this shade because there isn't very much base to it. It has a little bit of a peachy base, but it is kind of mostly sparkle. And when I think of my makeup collection, I thought of a couple of different formulas that are pretty similar to this. Another mainstream brand would be Makeup by Mario. Now, these aren't in the core collection. This is the Ethereal Eyes palette, but it has this shade up here, and it's not as multi-dimensional as I feel like Space Cowboy is, which is on my index finger, but it is a sheer base with a lot of sparkles. One differentiator between some indie brands is I find that indie brands will also do different sizes of sparkle, and I think that makes the sparkles more obvious. I also think I might have too much light in this video, but I'm not sure. And I think, honestly, this is like Makeup by Mario's take on a Moondust eyeshadow, although these feel more like toppers than I think that they are truly like an eyeshadow. Whereas, so when it comes to indie eyeshadows and this kind of thing, I first thought of my Phytosurgeon's eyeshadows, particularly the shades Lunar Lightwave and Fractal Freesia. And these are, I guess they are cream eyeshadows. I'm not really sure how to describe this formula because it is very firm. This is Fractal Freesia on the right, and then on the left, that is Lunar Lightwave. Kind of just get into the texture. It is like pretty firm. Like it would take, I think, a lot of pressure to dig some out. So Lunar Lightwave and Fractal Freesia. So this formula isn't just like a powder formula, which definitely differentiates it. And I think that the bases on them are a lot sheerer than Space Cowboy. It is funny because I don't feel like Space Cowboy has that strong of a base, but then now I'm swatching it next to things and I'm like, you can barely see the other shades and then you can see Space Cowboy pretty clearly with that orange base. I don't feel like it reads that way on my eyes, and that is like a heavy swatch of it. I would say that the ones from Phytosurgeons, I think the sparkles are maybe just a little bit larger, and I would say maybe, and I mean this not in a negative way, a little less evenly dispersed. And I think that there is a purpose to that because I find that sometimes when a sparkle is too consistent, it doesn't look as sparkly on the eye. And whenever there's some space between them, it really allows the sparkles to show. And also, you know, you're getting, like I said, you're going to get a more unique formula when it comes to a brand like Phytosurgeons. Going back to something that is sold in Sephora, I mean, this isn't sold anymore. This is the Natasha Denona Gold palette, but there are two topper shades in here. These are called Sparks and Kava, and these are really along a similar line of what we've been looking at. But I will say this formula is a bit dated. These are really dry feeling, and that's probably due to the age of the palette. But as you can see here, we're kind of back, hopefully you can see, we're back to a more consistent sparkle and all kind of one shade of sparkle. The thing that I think you find in Fractal Freesia and Lunar Lightwave from Phytosurgeons is that also like sometimes I think indie brands, a lot of them do duochromes and stuff, but also you'll find like some different colors of shimmer, and that will also lead to, I think, something that appears to be more sparkly because of the different colors in it. Different things are going to catch your eye depending on how the light's hitting it. Honestly, this is like the kind of thing that I love. I'm not going to be disappointed by using any of them, but I just think that the like ones from Phytosurgeons are a little more special feeling whenever it comes to this sheer base and topper. I have really been enjoying Space Cowboy. I wasn't really sure that it was going to impress me as it has impressed some other people or like a lot of people. It is really sparkly and really gorgeous. And something that it does that I think that both luxury brands and indie brands do is the base is either cool or warm, and then the topper shades are a different level of coolness. So like it's a warm base, but it has silver sparkles in it, and I think that adds a lot of intrigue. And we're going to look at another eyeshadow later that does a very similar thing. So let's move on to Lithium. So I think that Lithium is probably going to be better to compare some stuff to. I have like some different levels of like expensive brands and indie brands and like luxury indie brands and etc. This is the kind of eyeshadow color I've been like very into lately. So I think we're going to find some interesting things to look at here. So let's start with Lithium. Lithium is brown, but not like a super warm brown. I would say that this brown lands a little more in the middle, like a little of warm and cool. Just kind of like with Space Cowboy, the top tones, the sparkles in it are cooler leaning than the base. And I think that that leads to something very interesting. This was the first one I wore when I bought the Moondust eyeshadows. It like really impressed me. And the thing that I thought of first whenever I first got this was this from Victoria Beckham. This is the shade Mink Lid Luster. So in the pan, I feel like it looks pretty similar, but the texture of this is very different. This, I thought that they were creams, but I've heard someone say that that is just powder. But I think what we're going to find from Victoria Beckham, it is a much bigger swing both ways. The base is much warmer. The iciness on top is a lot cooler and looks almost blue. It kind of gives you more of like an oil slick look, like where Lithium maybe has less of a base pigment. Not that it's not there. I find that like Victoria Beckham's base pigment just goes a lot further. I would say in Victoria Beckham, you are getting more of like a metallic with some sparkle in it, where Lithium is much more of like a straight forward sparkle. And I don't know, do you guys consider Victoria Beckham to be a mainstream brand, or do we not think that because it's expensive? Because like, I don't know that a lot of people know about Victoria Beckham's brand. I feel like I talked about it on TikTok once and people didn't know that she even had a brand. From Chantecaille, it is the shade, goodness gracious, Tom, get it together. I'm not feeling well. I hope my voice is a little bit better in the studio. And this is definitely gonna be warmer than the other two, but it has a similar vibe whenever you swatch it out, except I think this is like the opposite. I think the base is cooler than the sparkles on it. And this is a baked formula, so very different. I guess a lot more demure when it comes to the sparkle in it. Like compared to Lithium, there's like almost barely any sparkle in it. And then also next to Victoria Beckham, which is such a strong take on something, it's like very demure. There's a lot less pigment to it. Luxury formulas often kind of lean into what Chantecaille has done here. I think what the lid lusters are supposed to be the antithesis of that. Victoria Beckham has powder eyeshadows that look a lot more like what you're seeing in this one. This is from Olivia Palermo. This is her Au Naturel palette. And I'm gonna swatch this shade down here. It's a shame that Olivia decided to close the brand because I think her eyeshadow formula is actually pretty cool. It's not as special as Lithium or I would say even the Victoria Beckham one, but it really holds its own. And I would say that this is like a very good standard definition of what like a regular shimmer to most people would be. Kind of sparse sparkle through it, a strong base to it, but like still very glitzy. Like that would be like an evening look for some people. But then when you look at something like the other eyeshadows, even including Elephant, you're getting something much more intense than what you're getting from Olivia. Still very beautiful, and like in the context of this eyeshadow, it is razzle dazzle, but it isn't like comparing it when you're comparing it to like other razzle dazzle. I do want to jump back to Phytosurgeons again. This is the shade Crystal Constellation from Phytosurgeons. And so just like we saw in the other Phytosurgeons shades, this has a much stronger base and the sparkle is inconsistent. And while I do think that the Olivia Palermo one has like more sparkle in it, I'm saying that with air quotes, I think that Crystal Constellation looks sparklier because the way it's dispersed is like a little uneven, and I think that the light catches that a little bit better. But something like Lithium is almost just kind of straight sparkle. It like looks a lot just like sparkle. This is something that you would see from an indie brand, and I would say not that all indie brand formulas are exactly the same. It's just kind of giving you the idea. When I touch this shade, it is a little bit softer pressed, and it almost kind of feels creamy. Lithium is like very, very firmly pressed. And like, I just swatched that and you can see that I left a fingerprint in it. And I've used Lithium many times and you can't even really tell just because of the difference in them. And this is something that I think is worth noting. Very few indie brands, and I think this is just like the main point of differentiation, go with like a straightforward color. I think I chose this one from this indie brand because I do feel like that this is like a pretty straightforward kind of color. But look at it even compared to, I think the closest thing would be Victoria Beckham's Mink. The consistency and the pigmentation of like an indie eyeshadow is like really, really intense, but still incredibly sparkly. Although I will say like Lithium is holding its own as far as like being the absolute powerhouse in sparkle. There is something to that. And then I just did one more swatch. This is from an old Natasha Denona palette. What I'm finding here is like maybe indie brands don't have exclusivity to being the most sparkly and interesting shades, because I do think Lithium actually is the sparkliest in this lineup. And maybe there is something to be said that it is not in their palettes. It's like, these are the kind of formulas they sell separately or on special occasions whenever they re-promote them in palettes for the holiday seasons. I think that there is something to be said for that. People often say that the Moondust eyeshadows, they think they're expensive, but indie brands sell their single shadows at not exactly the same cost, but at a pretty close cost. And oftentimes, they don't even come with their own packaging, which also costs money. So I do think there is a value there, although I think some people would probably wish that these were removable. I'm saying there is clearly a difference between the types of shimmer formulas you run into, even if you're staying in mainstream brands. Gorgeous, gorgeous, stunning, stunning. Let's look at the last one, and this will probably be the one that we are able to swatch the most indie eyeshadows next to and see different takes on it. So lastly, I have the shade Solstice. And this is a duochrome. I'm not sure you're going to be able to see all aspects of it. It's like one of those red shifts to green multi-chromes, but also kind of almost looks purple. And whenever I got the Moondust eyeshadows and I swatched all of them, this one did not feel as special to me because it's just not as sparkly. But there definitely is something there's something like to this. I actually have been wearing it a lot. Again, it is firmly pressed like the other two, but the finish is a lot smoother. Like that almost looks like a shiny stone on my finger. Same thing with Space Cowboy. I very rarely wear it so heavy that you get to see a lot of the base pigment. But what you see here is consistent sparkle. The sparkles are small particles and you get just a nice shift. I find that a lot of makeup brands have something like this. This is from Clionadh. It is the shade Grisaille. This formula is incredibly soft, and just looking at it from the get-go, there's so much more texture, and I do think that it's such a less smooth shine, which I don't think is a bad thing. There's just a lot more punch to it as well. Now, these aren't the exact same shades. They're like pretty similar to one another in what they're doing. Like they're duochromes with like a sparkly shimmer on top. And like I said with the Phytosurgence ones, I think that like the sparkle's inconsistent. There are some different colors of sparkle in the indie eyeshadow that make it look just much punchier than we have going on with Solstice. I have a couple shades here from Natasha Denona from palettes that they no longer make. Going from the Clionadh shade to this one, like this one just looks almost uninspired comparatively. The volume is so much more turned down from what is going on with the Clionadh shade Grisaille. So I'm going to swatch this one. This is also from Natasha Denona. It is like the deeper version of Solstice, but I would say that Solstice is a little more successful in being a little more sparkly, a little more interesting. If you like a smoother eyeshadow, I think that the Natasha Denona one would be really where it's at. I'm going to swatch this shade as well. This is from a different indie brand. So do you see how like this is just so much more drama, but it is like the same thing as Solstice. Like it has the same colors to it. There's just much more of the blue shift in this than there is in Solstice. Here's another one from Clionadh. That one has much less base pigment, but I think it has like similar shifts to what Solstice has. When it comes to Solstice, I've actually been very much enjoying wearing it. I'm not saying you have to like indie brands more because I have really enjoyed my looks with Solstice, and you know, sometimes I get intimidated as well from going with something with more sparkle. I tend to like more sparkle, so I might reach for something like this when I want something a little bit more, but I didn't feel like I had to go out of my way to use it. Like I was pulling out Solstice quite regularly. It is a very, very pretty shade. Also, if you have Solstice and some of these other shades, you could definitely use them in tandem to make something on X Games mode. I do want to do one more thing. I want to go back to the toppers without Space Cowboy. So like stuff that has less of a base, like the Makeup by Mario toppers and the Natasha Denona toppers. I'm just going to swatch these really quick. The Natasha Denona ones will go closer to my wrist. Talking about topper shades and swatching them so that I can get a point across or just even show you is very difficult to do that in a way where you can see everything on camera. The shades I'm going to compare these to aren't going to be like similar shade-wise, but I think it will show us like the prime difference. So this is the shade Ice Blink from Shine by SD. It's like my favorite eyeshadow shade. And so it is like an icy blue topper, but you can see here like the difference in the colors in the topper, like the difference in particle size and the difference in all the colors in the sparkle just kind of make it pop more and it's more sparkly. I also keep in mind that there is like actual color to this, whereas these ones are all like variations on beige and it is a little more icy. But even when you're looking at like a Clionadh topper, there is just something to them that just makes them look sparklier on the eye versus something from like a brand, like a regular brand. Even when you're talking about like what we're talking about in the Moondust shadows, there's just like an oomph to them that makes them just feel sparklier. We're all allowed to enjoy eyeshadow however we see fit. We're allowed to, like if you like more sparkly or less sparkly, but I thought it would just be fun today to like take a closer look at the sparkles going on on all of these different brands, whether they're indie and stuff you can find at Sephora or Ulta. Well, I don't buy a lot of stuff at Ulta or the drugstore, but you know, I think that this will get your brain going even if that is where you shop. So I hope I was able, well, I don't know. There wasn't really a point to be made in this video. It was just kind of like, let's look at eyeshadows and swatch them together. It's very swatch party, giving very that energy. But that is actually going to wrap up the video. Let me pull some things in frame for intrigue. Ooh, are you intrigued? But that's gonna end the video. If you enjoyed today's video and you are new to my channel, thank you so much for watching to the end. What I like to do on my channel is to help myself and help you be more discerning about the makeup, fashion, and fragrance that you're buying. We're heading into a season of heavy consumption, and I just wanna make sure I help you spend your dollar wisely if you should even choose to spend your dollar. I have channel memberships and Patreon. You can check those linked down below. I do additional content over there. That's a different way to support me, not necessarily a better way to support me. I shut the intrigue. Why did I do that? But if you want to check that out, go ahead, but there's no pressure to join. Thank you all to my current members and patrons. You are the absolute best. Thank you again to Merit for sponsoring today's video. Remember to check the link out at the top of my description box to save $20 on exclusive sets from Merit, and also check out my favorites from the brand. And that's it. Remember to follow your haute and you'll find me. I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth. Tits out.